What is up, guys? Welcome to another video. I forgot to say it in last video, but Happy New Year. It's 2026 now, and it's the reason why I wanted to make this video really quick. Basically, I'm going to be going over the different nodes that I've found that are going to be very essential to know and master if you want to succeed in building your automations inside N8N this year. This is coming off my personal experience. I built tons of workflows in the past, ranging from simple automation systems that, might connect a CRM to a specific system, to fully functional with multiple capabilities, AI agents, either text or voice. And the reason I'm sharing this is because I want you guys to succeed in when building your automations and really think about different approaches that you can take to solve the same problem. Sometimes we tend to overcomplicate ourselves for not knowing a feature or a node. That has been my experience. Sometimes I build something a certain way and then I go on YouTube and I see someone else do it and I realize it wasn't that hard. It wasn't supposed to be that hard. So that's why I'm making this video. That being said, if you're new to the channel, my name is Josue. I've been making content for the past couple months about AI and automation. So I've decided to make this channel just to document what I'm still building, sharing some of my learnings and insights that I've learned along the way. And with that being said, let's get right into it. So here are all the type of nodes that we're going to be going over today. So you see we have 8 of them. There's definitely more than 8, but I think these are key ones that you should learn and master and know when to use them if you want to succeed in building more complex systems. So let's start with the first one. So let's start with the schedule trigger. This is one of the first triggers that you're going to come across in whichever platform you're using for automation, Zapier, Make.com, N8N. This is like one of the most basic triggers that are very commonly used, but sometimes are underestimated on its power. If it's your first time seeing this, or if you just want a refresher, basically what the schedule trigger is you're able to manipulate when the automation gets triggered, when the workflow gets triggered based on a time interval. So for example, here we can choose from days, we can choose days between triggers, we can choose the time that it gets triggered, and this is going to be relative to whichever time zone you have set up for your workflow. So if you didn't know this, you have a time zone for each single workflow that you have inside N8N, which you can configure inside settings. You would just look for that time zone option over here. For example, here the default is Europe, Berlin. I'm in Phoenix, Arizona, so it's very important for me to know about this because I would always have to change it to Phoenix, Arizona. That way, if I set an automation for 12 a.m. here, it's going to trigger 12 p.m. if that makes sense. I don't know what the real time difference is, but you get the idea. Other than that, there's not much to say about it. Very simple. An example of this can be like a newsletter, and you want to nurture that audience by sending them daily newsletters that, let's say, you have inside a workflow and they're being created by AI and being sent directly to their emails. Maybe you got an email list that's pulled from Google Sheets and it's being sent through a Gmail trigger, and you want to trigger it every single time at the same time, every single day at the same time. Then this is what you would be using in that case. Obviously, that's just one very simple case. There's tons of cases, but with that being said, let's move on to the next one. So next one's going to be event triggers. What are event triggers? Event triggers is a trigger that's going to happen when an event happens. No, but seriously, it's going to get triggered when a specific action happens. So in this case, we're gonna have a Gmail trigger, and if I open this up, we're gonna see that it's going to happen whenever a message is received. So let's say you want to get notified whenever you get a specific message to your inbox, a message that's filtered out from the rest of your other messages. Maybe it's a reply from one of your leads that is interested. You might want to get notified for that. So that's when something like a Gmail trigger will come in. Same thing for a HubSpot trigger. Maybe you want a proposal to be sent to someone automatically whenever you move the lead in your pipeline from one stage to another. You can set up a HubSpot trigger, which is a CRM, and trigger the automation whenever that action happens. Maybe one of your salesperson moves the card from one stage to another one. We can also have like chat triggers. For example, when we receive a message through a platform like Telegram, we can connect it to an AI agent that is processing that message and is generating a response for whoever's texting. Obviously, these are just examples. What I'm trying to explain in here is that we have event triggers from third-party platforms that we can integrate into N8N and have those platform communicates with your workflow and trigger it whenever an action happens. Next, we're going to have the set node. There are multiple use cases for this node, but if you don't know what the set node or edit fields node is, it's basically setting a value into a variable. So let me show you what I mean by that.
What do you mean by that?
So if I open here the edit fields node, we're going to see that we have 2 modes, and I'm going to go over each one of them. First, I want to go into manual mapping, in which if you click on here, you're going to be able to set a variable in which you can give it a name. So let's say test. You can select the type of the variable, which can be a number, Boolean, which can be yes or no, so true and false. You can have an array, which is a list, an object, or binary data. But the most common case is going to be a string, which means text. So I can name this my name. And if I execute it, you're going to see that a variable is created. Let me just put it in schema so you can see. we have a variable called text, and we can use this variable further down our flow. And why is this useful? Because let's say, for example, I'm getting information from my form in my job form trigger. So I want to connect it to my edit fields, but there's a lot of information in that form that I don't need. I just need their phone number because it's very important. Maybe we want to label it something different, or maybe the internal name that we're receiving from job form is like some weird string because it's the internal code of the variable. You might want to rename and store your variable somewhere else, so that's easier for you to reference further down in your flow. So this is when you might want to use something like this. And now let me go over what the edit fields JSON is. So basically, as I mentioned before, there's two modes in here. If we set it in JSON, if you don't know what JSON is, it's basically like a code language, but it's not really code. It's just a way to set variables in a specific schema. So what do I mean by that? So here I'm going to paste some JSON code. This is not going to do anything other than setting variables, similar to how we did it manually using the other set node. But in here, we're doing it explicitly with a specific structure. So for example, here, I'm going to have a variable called project name, which is going to contain string type automation audit. We're going to have a priority level variable, which is going to contain an integer, which is going to be number 1. We're going to have is urgent, which is going to be a Boolean type, which can be true or false. We're going to have assign team, which is going to be an array or list. And then we're going to have metadata, which is going to be an object. So if you see, each one of these have a different sort of syntax. When you're writing a string, it's going to go in between quotes. If you're writing a integer, it's just a number, same as Boolean. Array, for example, is in between braces. And for an object, it's in between curly braces. And then inside an object, you can have multiple variables. So if I run this, you can see that the schema is going to be different JSON objects. Here we're going to have a type string, like I mentioned. That's why it has the T for text, number for integer. And this is very important because let's say, for example, if you want to clean out your outputs, similar to what I explained earlier, let's say you're getting a bunch of stuff from your Google Sheets, a bunch of rows that you don't really care about. You can create a JSON structure in which maybe you want to group certain columns together. Then you might want to get an array so that they're all together in a list. So that's the set node in a nutshell. I give you guys a couple of use cases, but now let's move into the HTTP request. This is a really, really big one. This is going to be super useful for you to connect platforms or applications and systems that are not available inside Innate and natively. And what I mean by that, they're not available over here in the search bar. So let's say, for example, if I wanted to maybe get the weather information and I want to use a weather API, let me search weather. So I guess there is a weather API, but let's say it wasn't from Open Weather, then you might want to check if that other platform that you want to use has an API integration that you can call using an HTTP request. So after doing some research, I found this website, National Weather Service. I think it's only for the US. But they do have an API. And so if I go into api.weather.gov, we're going to see this documentation. And here's where we're going to see all the information on how we can access data from this provider inside Innate. And for a quick example, I'm just going to use the glossary endpoint. What an endpoint is basically an action. So here you have multiple actions, you have alerts actions, you have aviation, I don't know what that means, actions, and you also get a method, which in this case is get. What does this mean? This means that we're going to be getting information from this platform through their API. There's other types of methods such as post, which means we're going to be changing information inside a platform. An example of this can be if you're changing information inside HubSpot, you're most likely going to be using a post method. Those are the two methods that you're going to be using the most when integrating APIs through HTTP requests. And before we test it, let's open up the HTTP request and see what we have in here. We can choose the method. Like I said, here we're going to be using get method. Then the URL is usually going to be set in the docs. So this is like the documentation of the API that the system or application is providing to us. This is probably not the best. It's a little vague. There's better API documentation. A lot of these are not very user-friendly sometimes, like this one. If you don't know anything about APIs, then you might be a little lost here. But let me show you what I mean by this. So if we have the glossary endpoint, but we don't have the whole URL, then most likely we're going to be using this URL. So that's what I put in here. In the URL, I put api.weather.gov/glossary. So why don't we get our API key and see if we can make a call to this. So for that, I'm going to click here on authorize. And looks like we can get an API key. So let me just click logout because I've already tested this, but let's put test, click authorize. What that's doing is basically creating like a temporary API key for us to use. That's just going to be called test. And it says that we need to include a header, which is going to have the name API key. And the value is going to be that API key, which is just test. So that's what we want to do in here. We have to use header. So we're going to turn that on. I'm going to give it a name, which was API key. And then the value is just going to be whatever it says, whatever I enter in there. So test. If I click execute, looks like we're getting some data back. And this is all the data that we got back from using the glossary endpoint. I'm assuming it's just definitions related to weather. I don't know. But it succeeded because we got information back. And another use case for this node would be scraping information. So this one's a little bit more simple. But we can scrape information from a website using this node as well, using the method get. Let's say if I go into, let's say Dapta.ai, you're going to see that I have a nice landing page with a lot of information in here. So let's say I wanted to scrape the data in here. What I mean by scraping is just basically extracting the text from the landing page. I could do that using an HTTP request. Very simple, by just pasting the URL in there. Nothing else, just hit execute. And this is all the HTML of that landing page. As you see, there's a lot of information here that we don't need. Let's say if we just wanted the text, then this would pretty much be useless because there's information such as colors and images and a bunch of embedded stuff that are not useful for us. So with that being said, why don't we move into the code node, and I'm going to show you guys how the code node can be very powerful if, let's say, in this example that I'm going to give, I wanted to clean up the data from Scrape. So first of all, if you've never seen this code node, it's very simple. You can basically write some code in here in JavaScript or Python. I mostly use JavaScript to manipulate the data that you're getting from your previous nodes. So let's say, for example, in this case, if my data is not the way I want it, I can write some code to clean it up and have a much more organized output. In this case, I'm going to be showing how I'm cleaning that Scrape data and putting it in a format in which I'm only getting the text out. And I'm going to show you guys a trick, which is using an LLM or another AI provider to write the code. You don't need to know about coding to be able to use this node at all. I don't know coding. I don't know how to code, but I know the logic and I know automation. And that's all you need in 2026 if you want to succeed in building these type of systems. So my favorite coding AI is Claude. So let's go into Claude. So I'm here in Claude and I'm going to type a prompt, and it's going to be a very simple prompt. So why don't we go ahead and grab the output that I got from my Scrape. This is a very good practice you should get in the habit of doing, is just copying the output of whatever you want to manipulate and providing that into Claude. So you do that by pressing over here in that copy icon, and then we can go into Claude and I can give my prompt. I can say something like, I want you to please evaluate the following output that I got from scraping a website inside N8N using an HTTP request. And I want you to write code for a code node that's going to clean up this data and only keep the text in a markdown format. And then I just need to paste all the information from that node and let it run. Now Claude is just going to do the magic for us, and it's going to write some code, and we're going to test it here to see if it's something that is useful for us. So from what I can understand that it's doing, it's basically writing some code to get rid of certain symbols and stuff that's embedded. So we can actually just copy this, go back, go into our code node, replace everything in here, and paste the code. And if I click, actually I want to connect these two, and I'm going to add a manual trigger just so that we don't get any crashes. Execute workflow, which is just these three nodes, and let's see the output. So it looks like it's giving back the original, which I don't really need, but we got some clean text as well. So let me scroll all the way down for that. And as we see, here's the clean text, much smaller. We have all the information that's on the landing page. So DAPT.ai, no code, voice, text and workflow automation for SMBs, and all the rest of the text. That's one use case of the code node. Obviously, anything is possible, but just so you guys are aware, this is a very important node that you should get used to using. Number 6, we have if and switch. This might be a little bit confusing, or people might use them interchangeably, depending on what you're trying to do. So first off, we're going to talk about the if. This is just a true or false node. Basically, you're going to be able to input a value in here and a value in here, and you're going to select an operator depending on the different data type. So let's say if you're comparing two words and seeing if they match together, then you would be using type string is equal to. So let's, just for testing, let's do test and test. This is going to return no output, but it's going to go out the true branch. So if you see here, we have two branches, true and false, and you can select what happens in each branch. So if it's true, maybe you want to do something specific, same way as if it was false. If I do test 1 and hit execute, it's now green on the false branch. And you can map variables in here. Maybe you're comparing the answer of a form of someone being interested versus the word interested. And if it matches, maybe it goes to true and it sends them an email. If it's false, maybe something else happens. Now you can add multiple conditions here. Maybe if they're equal and something else is equal or not equal, then that's how this works. But you're always only going to have two branches and two outputs. Unlike the switch, it works very similar. You're able to compare two variables, same operators, so is equal to or not. And if it's equal to that, then it's going to go out that specific branch. In this thing, this is branch 0. If I add more, that number increases. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, because it starts from 0 branches. Basically, it's a router. So depending on what rules you have, you can route your data to go that specific route if it matches the conditions. You can rename them. This is important if your workflow is a little bit more complex than just true and false. Your conditional is a little bit more complex. One thing that you should note is that you can only do one operation. You don't have the and or the or operations that you have here, such as this one. So just keep that in mind. But moving on, we have probably the most important ones out of all of these, or maybe not, but the most trending ones, which are going to be the AI agent node and the AI step nodes. These are two super very important nodes. I use them all the time. I use AI agents to process data. More specifically, if I'm building like a chatbot, I would usually use an AI agent that connects to, for example, Telegram. We get the message, the AI agent processes it, and it provides a response. Opening this up, we can connect it to a chat trigger node, but you most likely are going to use it by defining below the prompt, in which you can write your own prompt. You can add a system prompt. The system message is your main prompt. This might be a little bit confusing, and I've said this in previous videos, but your prompt is going to be the input that you want the agent to process. Then your system message is going to be your prompt. I know it's like switch, but it's just how it's supposed to be. So here are going to be your main instructions of what you want it to do, when, what the output should look like depending on the input. All those sort of things are going to go inside the system message, and then the input is going to go in the prompt. Then you can configure specific chat models. For example, you can choose from ChatGPT or GPT models. From OpenAI, you can choose Claude, you can choose DeepSeek. You can also give them memory. What this means is if you want to store some sort of chat history that you want the agent to have context on, then you might want to connect it into a simple memory, or use something more advanced like a Postgres chat memory or any of these other options. Now, tools, these are the superpowers of the agent. Pretty much is where you give them access to external platforms such as, for example, Google Sheets. So if I search Sheets, we have a Google Sheets tool in which we can perform multiple actions. Like once you connect your credentials, you can select if you want to get a row from which document and from which sheet. And then you would prompt the agent inside the system message, use the tool, get rows and sheets, and the agent would independently go and use it. I've used tools in multiple of my other videos, so definitely check them out, in which I'm using AI agents. Then we have a message and model step, which is a little bit more simple than an AI agent. You can also give it tools, but you don't really get the choice of giving it a memory or the chat model. This is going to depend on the provider. For example, OpenAI does provide the message and model step, and I'm sure Anthropic does as well. So here, message and model. And this is a little bit more static. Like I mentioned, you're not going to have the ability to give it memory. And I would use this, for example, when you need to do simple things like extract data from like a resume, or like review a resume and extract the most relevant experience of a candidate, then you might want to use something like this. The prompting is a little bit different. You usually have multiple roles and types that you can send. This is kind of like your training area for this step. Usually the best practice is to have a system message in which just you give it a general like identity to your agent. So for example, you're a helpful assistant. I know, very vague, but that's just how it is. You can also choose the model, for example, GPT-4o, and then you can send a user prompt, which would be what you would say to the model. So for example, here, so if I say hello, it's just gonna give me a hi back, something similar, I guess. So here, text, hello, how can I help you today? You see? And now with our final node, we have sub workflows. So workflows are very important. This is something that I started using a lot this year. And it's when I was building workflows that got a little bit too big, to the point where if there were multiple instances running at the same time, then it would just crash. So one good practice that you want to get in the habit of doing is splitting up your workflows into multiple workflows. You can always create a sub workflow and execute it from another workflow if the workflow gets too big, because you're running the chance of it breaking and just demanding too much power from your server if you're self-hosted or your local machine, and just crashing it. So I'm just going to briefly open it and show you guys that you can choose any of your other workflows to trigger. You can change the mode, which for example, here we have run once with all items. This means all the data that this last node receives before executing the sub workflow is going to get pushed to that sub workflow. If you don't want all of it to get pushed, then in your sub workflow, you're going to have the node of when executed by another workflow. So if you see, these are two different nodes. I only had one, but there are two of them. One of them is a trigger and the other one's like the receiver. So this is the one that's going to be sending the signal to the trigger. And this is going to be the one that's going to be receiving that signal. And then the receiver one, you can configure what are the variables that you want to receive. And what that's going to do is going to allow you in your sender node to configure those values. So yeah, there you go. These are all the nodes that I think you should master this year if you want to succeed in building automations and more complex workflows that don't break. So really just use this creatively to make all of your workflows efficient and optimized, so that you're not doing stuff that you're not supposed to be doing in terms of maybe putting too many steps together when you can reduce it to one by using one of these nodes. And I would say definitely explore different things. That's how I learned most of this stuff. Sometimes I would build a workflow that worked, but then I go back a couple weeks later and I'm like, I could have done this differently. So I would encourage you to go back into your workflow database, search some workflows that might already be in production. Maybe they're running on a client, or you just built it a while ago and then you want to revise it, then go back to it and see, how would I do it different now that I know about these nodes. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please let me know in the comments if you have any questions. Also, I'm going to be leaving a link down below for my Skool community. I've just launched this community very recently, but if you could join, that would help me a lot. If you have questions, you can also post them there. I'm going to try to be as active as possible. Big things are coming. I'm going to be putting all the resources from this YouTube inside the Skool community, and I'm going to try to build a course, but I'm not going to spoil it too much for you guys. So leave a like on the video and subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next one.